Hello, a bit of a milestone today. I soldered the top on the case, which was not entirely straightforward, as nothing seems to be. I used plenty of flux and I attached on one side with medium white solder, and it didn't really run how I wanted it to run. When you solder something, you need the solder to touch both pieces at the same time that you wish to solder together, and you need to get them to a heat where the solder runs at approximately the same time. The solder tends to run towards the hottest part, and so I set this up. I fluxed everything. I heated it so that the flux went solid, because it fizzes a bit as it evaporates. And then using my solder brush, I lifted solder and put it all along the seams. It's probably 6 really small pieces of solder along the seam, and then I heated it up, and they went molten, but stayed on one side of the join. They didn't run across to the other. They were touching both pieces of material when I put them on, but the solder tends to curl up into a ball when you heat it, and so it shrunk away from the yellow gold part and just ran on the white gold part. So then I tried 18 karat yellow gold solder, easy, and this is a wire kind of solder which I just dabbed on, a bit like a welder, and I covered most of the case with solder, so it was extremely ugly, but eventually the two pieces became joined together, and obviously that's the key feature of soldering, that you want a strong join between the two. Just means that there's a bit more to clean up with my file and my wet and dry afterwards. Quite a lot of solder to file off. So this is me attempting to clean it up. It's a little bit nerve-wracking as well, attacking something like this with a file. You don't want to put lines in it, you don't want to take the corners off completely. There's one little bit on the case which looked kind of nibbled, but just taking off the hard corner from the front made it look presentable again. And trying to clean up these solder joins means taking back the yellow gold to the same level as the white gold, and actually a little bit beyond, taking the surface of the white gold off that piece between the case. And also mixed feelings, because you want it to look clean, so you want to take it back sufficiently, but you also want to lose the minimum of material, because obviously 18 karat gold is an expensive material. You'd prefer it all to be as much weight in the piece as possible, and the least amount of dust in your scrap pot. So I'm just cleaning this up with a file. The pieces do fit inside the case. When I held the top in position to double check where I was soldering it, everything was fine, and once it was soldered I noticed it was out by about a millimetre, maybe less than a millimetre, but it's sufficient that I can see the hole is not in the centre of the dial, by the tune of about a millimetre, which in the grand scheme of things is not much. It's about 5% out. But I know that it's not right, it's not perfect. Maybe most people wouldn't pick it out with their eye and notice it, but the giveaway is that the bezel that goes around the dial, I can just see the lip of it at the 12 o'clock end of the dial, which means that that top layer, that hole, should have been about 1 millimetre further down, and then you wouldn't have seen the edge of that bezel. It's impossible to move it because the way that I've soldered the top on, I soldered each corner and then I soldered up the middle bit. To manage to get everything hot enough in order to unsolder all of it at the same time, probably going to end up melting the thing, so I'm just going to have to live with it. It's the first watch I've ever made. It's not much of an excuse, but that is some excuse, and it's a learning curve. And also it's about 25 years since I've done anything like this at a bench anyway, so I'm not entirely in practice. It's a funny thing really. Handmade things aren't supposed to be perfect really, that's what gives them a soul. But I would have liked to have had it better than it is. But most people probably aren't going to see the faults as much as the virtue in the item. It's just that I know that there's a few little faults, so I'm giving my effort 7 out of 10, although I'm sure there's some people who would be impressed with what I've done. It's not altogether a failure because it does appear that I'm going to have a working watch that I've made out of precious materials. And just to say that you've actually done it is good, but I know that when people look at this thing and they want to see what I've done, I'm just going to think, oh, they're going to notice the faults in it as they're immediately apparent to me. Anyway, the steps now just involve filing up and polishing. I did use paper on this, and I've got it to a reasonable finish. It's ready for polishing, but again, lost a bit of video, so you'll see it next time. And the good news is that the pieces do slide into the case and don't move around too much. I'm hoping that the spring lugs line up perfectly. I haven't checked that yet. If they don't, I'll probably just touch the back of the holes with a ball phrase, which is like a round grindy thing, just to take the edges off on the inside of the case, to aid the spring bars popping into the holes as they should do. Basically just almost countersinking the inside of the hole so that it guides the spring lugs in. And after I polish it, I'm going to give the case to the watchmaker to cement the glass in, which you're probably not going to see on video because he's an old school gentleman and I don't really want to impose upon him. I don't think he's ever had me in his workshop. Business is normally conducted in the living room or the front doorstep. So you've got that to come. Thanks for watching.